Welcome, everybody. You ready for another SACNAS conference? Well, I have one little favor before we start. If you have a cell phone, pager, iPod, MP3 player, whatever, could you please put it on silent mode or whatever mode floats your boat? Just as long as the rest of us don't hear it. All right, so this is the kickoff event for the 2010 SACNAS conference. We did this last year for the first time, and it was a very huge success, and I think the reason it was as successful as it was is because it pretty much sets the tone for the entire conference. It's all about networking, meeting people, communicating, and the kind of people you're going to meet at the conference are exactly like those that are on the stage today, and shortly they will introduce themselves. So the whole point of this particular panel is for you to find out more about them and how their experiences can provide information and advice to you to get through your own challenges and careers. Everybody here at this conference is here for you. Everybody here at this conference wants you to succeed. So although you start the whole conference by hearing and talking to the individuals here on the stage, use everybody at this conference as a resource, because they are here because they want you to succeed. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to introduce myself. Each of the panelists will introduce themselves as well. I'll kick everything off with a few questions of our panelists. The remainder of the time, which is about 45 minutes, is for you to ask questions of the panelists. There's a mic over, two mics over on this row on this side, and there's two mics over on the row on this side. So when you are ready to start asking questions, we're going to need you to walk out to the mics. Okay? So, who am I? My name is Tina Garza. I am from El Paso. So this is a picture of me when I was in high school. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten all the way through my senior year in college. Yeah, I was born of very Catholic, devout Mexican parents. And it was an all-girls high school to top it all off. And then I ended up going to St. Mary's University. So I was in El Paso, went to San Antonio, far enough away from home, but it was still culturally familiar. And I'm going to let you figure out what year I went to college just looking at the hairdos. Any guesses? 87. Close. Can you read what the shirt actually says on it? Yeah, party shirt. So I was there for 4 years. And my sophomore year in college, I actually met this individual, Eloy Rodriguez, who was at UC Irvine at the time. He was also a very active member of SACNAS. And that's me at my second SACNAS conference in 1990. So I've actually been coming to this for 21 years. And it's still just as invigorating and as empowering as it was when I was a sophomore in college. Then I went, okay, this is another indication of the times. Look at the glasses. It's like 3/4 of it don't even cover your eyes. They're like down on the cheeks. This is used as an example. I use this every year just to show people that when you're in grad school, it's all about balance, that you can have fun. So I'm the one dressed supposedly as a marshmallow. They thought I was a roll of toilet paper. But I'm like, oh, well, it's a costume and it works. So after graduate school, I was at the University of Virginia for 6 years, moved to Toronto for 3 years for my postdoc, and then I came back home to El Paso at the University of Texas at El Paso. And so this is our chapter that we won the first Chapter of the Year award 3, 4, 5 years ago. I can't remember how long it was. And that's me. Y'all, you can look for me. And this is my lab. And now I am a board member of SACNAS. So it essentially kind of comes full circle. And I'll leave it there, and we'll introduce our next panelist.
Hi, Keshi. I'm Monica Teslakai, and I am a Zuni Indian, or a Shiwi, as we call ourselves. And I come from a very humble background. My dad grew up on the Zuni reservation and in boarding schools, but he took a one-way bus ticket to Chicago, where he met my mother, who's also part Indian, but she was from a family where they tried to forget that they were part Indian. So she married my dad, she said, because she thought she would reconnect with herself. I'm the third daughter, and then I have 3 younger brothers. And like many American Indian families, my dad was an alcoholic, and I had a difficult life early on. And as a result of that, by the time I was 13, after the second time that I tried to kill myself, my mother called Indian Health Services, and they put me in a mental hospital with adults. And I know that sounds horrible, and it was, But while I was there, I have this picture of the Shalako and the Koyemshi, the mudhead, because while I was there, my ancestors came to talk to me. And we went to the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. And I always go to the aviary because, of course, birds are important to my culture. Bird feathers are spiritual. And they had a golden eagle. And when I was there, a golden eagle actually came up to me, to the fence, and laid an egg. And for the rest of my life, that always meant to me that my ancestors didn't want me to let go of my life because they had a purpose for me, something I needed to do. And so I think of the next part of my life in terms of the story of my people, the creation story of my people, which is a story of emergence. We started in the underworld, and in the underworld, we were dirty, disgusting, repulsive creatures. And the Creator sent people to guide us out of those underworlds up into the current world. And each time we emerged, we became more and more human. And when my ancestors came to me when I was in that state where I didn't know who I was anymore, they helped me emerge and become a leader. I hope to be someday. I'm starting on that path. So as part of emerging, this picture is of me at the LEAD business conference at Columbia University. And they took us to multiple places like Johnson & Johnson and showed us what the world could be like. From there, I went to the University of Notre Dame. I spent a year in Japan, so the top picture with the snow is me in Japan at the snow festival, and me at the ocean, and me and the American Indian students with Spike Lee at Notre Dame, and my graduation from Notre Dame. So imagine if I had ended my life then, all these things would not have happened. From there, I was working with kids for 8 years. I was a juvenile probation officer. And I worked with kids who came from homes that were much worse than my own. And I felt overwhelmed by the lack of knowledge about Mexican Americans, Native American child development. All the programs we had didn't seem to be working. So I decided to go back to graduate school, where I still had my nephew with me, and that's my advisor and the other students. I graduated from the University of Kansas in 2005. And it took a lot of support to get me here today. Primarily, my two sisters supported me. So the one in the pink is my oldest sister, and she's an assistant U.S. attorney currently in Washington, D.C., advising on Border Patrol policy. And my other sister is an engineer. And they say when I tried to end my life, I saved their lives too, because we got some help to learn that our lives didn't have to be like our parents. From there, many more people mentored me. Coming from where I came from, it took a lot of support to get to where I am today. So my first mentor was Sharon O'Brien, who was a professor at Notre Dame. She brought me to the University of Kansas. And then Marigold Linton, who's the former SACNAS president, got me through my PhD because I had no clue what I was doing. My friend Carolyn Roy gave me all the supplies I needed to get my dissertation done. And then my postdoctoral advisor was Barbara Rogoff. And I have this little poem that I wrote about who I think I am and what it's been like for me in graduate school, because it's been difficult coming from the background I came from into this new world. It's been very confusing at times. And because of my work with the juveniles on the reservation, I came in really angry, wanting to change things for kids today. So when I returned to school, I went as the coyote, trickster, a woman who went to extremes to get her point across. But I quickly learned that wouldn't work in my new upper-class academic society. And yet I knew I couldn't go back to that world where everyone says, if you can't beat them, join them. And in my heart, I knew I couldn't add to the reservoir of tears and the years of fermented pain in that highly cherished bottle. So I kept reading Piaget, Vygotsky, Thalin, and Smith until I found an acceptable way to be a coyote in academic clothing. So I invite all of you to be tricksters with me. Resist the messages we hear in society, the stereotypes, but use science as your act of resistance.
Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Velasco. I am a professor at the University of Texas at El Paso. And one of the interesting things, I'm also chair of the Department of Geology. I served as past president of SACNAS. I rotated off the board last year. One of the interesting things that I want to reiterate what Dr. Garza said to start off with is that SACNAS is an incredible mentoring and networking opportunity. Tina and I met here at the conference a number of years ago. I don't think she liked me initially, but that's okay. But the point is that I'm from Los Angeles, and Tina was at El Paso, and I had just earned that faculty position at El Paso, and she welcomed me with open arms. And since then, we've had I'd say we have an incredible friendship that's gone on for many, many years. So in many respects, what you should take out of the conference is just that. This is an incredible opportunity to build beautiful relationships, and you can help each other along the way. This slideshow was put together based on the biography project that's on the SACNAS website. I guess my love, I'm actually a seismologist by training. That's someone that studies earthquakes. I'm actually from Los Angeles, and this is not the LA River, right? But you can see that this is actually, I guess, what started my inclination for the outdoors. And when I went to school, I went to UCLA as an undergraduate. I didn't really know what I wanted to be. I was good at math, but I loved being outside. So I looked at the catalog and said, geophysics, that's perfect. Good at physics, good at geology, that means I can cross the two. And that was how I chose my major. What that led to, though, was an opportunity to go to graduate school at UC Santa Cruz, and that's where I got my PhD. And this is actually me with my grandparents. I have one living grandmother right now who's almost 100 years old, and that's her on my right. And this is the graduation. And in some respects, it was the culmination of many, many years of work, but it was also a celebration for my family. I was the first person to graduate with an advanced degree. And in fact, my parents do not have college degrees. So this is an incredible opportunity for the family. So when you get those successes, it's not just about you and your success, it's about the family success. And everyone takes incredible pride in that. And I want you to walk away with that. This is a little personal. I ran marathons on the side for a while there. And that is a mustache I'm wearing, which I'm no longer wearing. I was just lamenting that everyone likes to put pictures of me with mustaches. I only had it for 3 years. This is a picture that was in 2008. I'm actually in Antarctica with 29 students and professors. One of the incredible things that affords a faculty member is that you can work with who you want and you can do incredible things. In this particular project, we took 29 students and high school teachers, I've seen some of them in the room already, to Antarctica. This is a picture of me and my wife, who was also part of this adventure. And that just shows you that the incredible opportunities that you can take by continuing with your advanced degree. And that's something that SACNAS pushes, and it's something that very few organizations push. But really, ever since I had my PhD, this is what I tell students: life has been cake. I mean, life is easy compared to what it was getting through it. This is a picture of me at my wedding, and also something that you might see on the SACNAS and website. And this is me handing out awards, I guess, at one of the SACNAS events. And this is at last year's conference with my parents, who are just living up the road from here, and that's my wife, Edith. So what I want to walk away from you is that one of the things that happened just recently for me is that I run a program for undergrad research at El Paso, and we were doing mock interviews for students to get them prepared. And a student came in the other day that was absolutely terrified of me. I had no idea why. I could just tell. I sensed she was incredibly, incredibly nervous, you know. And I guess she had told someone else that, I can't believe they put me with Dr. Velasco. And there was an incredible intimidation factor just because of who I was. Well, who I am is a real person, and I think that's one of the things that people, it's not the title, you know, and I am chair, but it doesn't mean that I'm not a real person. And I think that's the thing that you have to break down those barriers, especially you students trying to move forward to interact with people. We're all real people, you know, we have sense of humors, Some of them are a little quirky or whatnot, but I mean, in some respects, just walk away with this is an incredible opportunity to meet new people. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Rodriguez, and I tend to talk a lot, so I made notes to make sure I keep my time under my 5 minutes. I really value this opportunity to speak with you. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at UCSC in the physics department, and in our lab, our goal is to increase the efficiency and lower the cost of current photovoltaic and solar cell technologies. And so I do a couple of projects. This is a picture of luminescent solar concentrator. This is one of the projects that I work on. Basically, these are plastic sheets with luminescent materials embedded into them. They absorb and emit light. The light's wave guided to the edges where we have some silicon strips along there, and in that way they can power the LEDs. And so the good thing about these is that you can use small strips of solar cells, and they don't require expensive tracking systems. Another project I work on, I do temperature-dependent studies of thin-film nanoparticle-based solar cells that we make in our lab. I basically cool them down with liquid nitrogen and observe how their properties change as they warm back up. And this helps us to understand what kinds of materials and combinations of materials work best to produce the highest efficiency solar cells. And so this is what I do. And we do a lot of Save the Earth type work in our lab, but what really drives me as a scientist is I love getting instruments together and writing computer programs to control the instruments, to get the data that I need to figure out what's going on inside of the devices that I work on. I love doing that. And it's kind of funny because when I first transferred to UCSC as an undergraduate with my 3 kids, my goal in life was to be a world-famous Chicana poet. And instead, I became the first Chicana to graduate with a physics PhD at UCSC. So, thank you. So I'm not like the other physicists in the department whose parents went to college, they were scientists, and they spent all their time in the garage doing God knows what, all kinds of crazy stuff. My story is a little bit different. I grew up in Oakland. This is my family, and I'm the youngest of 5. My father passed away many years ago. My mother passed away just a few months before I got my PhD. They didn't go to high school, and in fact, none of my brothers and sisters graduated from high school. I was the only one. And it hurts because my father would have loved to do science. He really loved to do science. He once bought a book in a thrift store. It was Carl Sagan's Cosmos book. And he read it all the time, and he would say to me, "Mija, be a scientist. It's fantastic." And back in the day in Oakland, my parents would regularly take us out to Safeway, to the farm worker picket lines. And my older brothers and sisters were Brown Berets, and we would always go to these events. And I remember what that felt like. I remember the pride, the feeling that together we are strong and we can do anything, and no one should ever treat us like we don't matter. And so as I made my way through my career, there were some really tough times, and I really believe that these Si Se Puede days back in Oakland, back in the day, helped me when I used to ask myself, can I do this? Can I make it through? Am I strong enough? And I would always say yes, even though I didn't feel like it. And I think it's because of this. So my parents wanted me to go to college, and of course they didn't really know what that meant. I learned how to type and to take shorthand in high school, so when I went to the community college, I quickly dropped out of every class. I ended up working at the mall, and a recruiter came in and gave me the spiel, see the world, join the Air Force. And so that's what I did, and my father was disappointed, and my mother was disappointed. My mother wanted me to stay home and find a husband, and I said, hell no, I'm not getting married until I'm 36. So at 18, I went into the Air Force, and within a year, I was married. And my father said, you went all the way to Germany to meet some Chicano from East LA? Can't believe I did that. So anyway, years later, after I was discharged, I found myself 3 children, living with my mom, working as a single mom. And I always thought to myself, I wish I had gone to college. So I went back to that junior college where I had quickly dropped out of every class, and I got involved with the Puente program. And they're a program of English mentoring counseling program. And students in that program in their English classes got to read Chicano, Latino authors and got to write about their own experiences. So this is where I decided to live my life as a poet. And I even got awards. And the Puente program, of course, they were trying to get students to transfer to go to universities. They took us to a conference and they took us to UCSC, the only university I'd ever been to. And of course, it was another Si Se Puede day, and I applied and got in. It was the best thing I could do for my kids. We lived at Family Student Housing. This is a picture of them and their friends at Family Student Housing, where they had all these programs for kids, safe neighborhood, good schools for them. I'm really glad I did it. So I was set to be a poet. And yet, before I left the junior college, I finally took the math class I was putting off. And I did really well. They showed us pictures of scientists using math, and it was very mysterious. So I decided that when I got to UCSC, I was going to take a science class. I was going to figure out what all this science stuff was all about. And I took Earth catastrophes in Earth science class, and I learned about volcanoes and earthquakes and the Big Bang. And so the poet in me was captivated, and I decided to major in physics. After I graduated with my undergraduate degree, I worked at the Academic Excellence Program, and I came to a SACNAS conference with the students, and Si Se Puede, I went back and said, I want to get my PhD. I'm going to hurry up because I'm over time. So here I am graduating with my PhD, and I brought my parents up with me, a picture of them. And this is my favorite picture, my kids watching me get my PhD. And here is me walking, thank you, marching out. Now, I left out a lot of stories, a lot of hardcore stories, but just suffice it to say that, you know, racism, sexism, all manner of social injustice, they make things hard. But at the same time, I'm really grateful for all the programs that are represented here and all the people that supported me to get over those obstacles.
Go ahead and go to the next one. So the format now is for me to actually kind of just grease the wheels and get questions started, but I actually think that they've provided you with quite a bit of information. Do we have questions already? Or do you want me to get started? Okay, all right. So I'm going to start with Monica. So Monica, how did you incorporate your life experiences into your choice of what science to go into?
Well, you know, I was really confused for a long time, clearly. But I prayed a lot about it. Because of what happened to me as a young child, I'm a very spiritual person. And I prayed a lot to God, Oana Wilona, as we call him, or her, to help me, you know, figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I took the LSAT, the GRE, the GMAT. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And this whole time I've been working with kids, you know. And finally, I just realized I need to go back to school to get a PhD in psychology. But as an undergrad, I graduated from Notre Dame in 3.5 years, so I didn't have the experience, the research experience I needed. And luckily, Sharon O'Brien, my professor from Notre Dame, called me and said, do you want to come and get a master's in Indigenous Nations Studies? And I said, heck no, I don't want to study what a bunch of white people write about Indians. Are you kidding me? And she said, well, no, just come on out here. And you know, you can start doing research and you can get some experience and hopefully you can get into a PhD program. And again, God was working in my life because as soon as I got there, I found that the Study of Early Childcare and Youth Development was hiring, and they hired me as the home coordinator. So I started doing research right away. I went out and was working with kids, collecting data on their cognitive and social development. And I forgot to say I'm now a developmental psychologist at the University of Utah. And so from that study, I told the primary investigator that I wanted to get a PhD, and so she said, well, why didn't you tell me that a long time ago? Of course I'll take you as my student. And so I finally got into the PhD program in psychology, and that's when Marigold found this misguided soul and helped me out, helped me get to the PhD, because I have a lot of passion, and sometimes I channel it the wrong way, so I have people that help me channel it back the right way. And I think my passion working with kids and seeing how kids were living and seeing the discrimination of the justice system against American Indians and Mexicans and Mexican Americans has really fueled my passion to use science and the scientific method to show that we're not stupid, we're not genetically inferior, and our kids should have every opportunity. And that's what my writing's doing now, hopefully.
And I just want to highlight something that she actually brought out. She's already faculty at the University of Utah, and she's talked about the fact that she still has mentors that help guide her. So you never lose the need for mentors. So Silvia, so you talked about obstacles that you faced throughout your, yes, Silvia, right? Huh?
Yvonne.
Yvonne, hijo, I'm sorry.
That was last year's panel.
You talked about the obstacles that you'd faced, quite a few of them. Which would you say was the most challenging that you had to face, and how did you deal with it?
Well, there were a lot of obstacles from advisors who underestimated me, to money, to having a family, having to balance that, and but I would say like my biggest obstacle had to do with me not speaking up, not being honest, and while not taking my place in the science community, because I used to go in there and feel like I'm sort of an outsider, and so I just have to take what people get and what people give me, or I have to try to cover all my bases, or I can never say no, and I wasn't able to. That was my problem. I wasn't able to say no, I don't want to do this, or no, this is how. I wasn't able to express my obstacles. So I'll give you an example. One of the, I have a job in the lab, and we generate a lot of hazardous materials in our lab, and so everybody has to take turns being the hazardous materials waste disposal person. And every time the hazardous waste container was full, people used to come and tell me the trash is full. And so I used to go over there and the trash would be like overflowing, and so I would be upset. I really resented that, and that people were thinking of me as the person that had to take out the trash, and so that affected my concentration. I mean, every time I was in a conversation with somebody, I was remembering like how they let the trash overflow, and so I had to. It was interfering with my work. It was interfering with the way I was interacting in meetings, and so until one day I finally said, hey, you know what? Maybe you think I look like the maid, but I'm not the maid. You need to clean up your trash. You need to be more respectful. And so once I did that, people started to respond, and then I was able to work again. So I think part of it is just being able to express and not being afraid to ask for what I need and to let people know what my experience is.
So how did you find your voice to do that?
I think I just, I got overwhelmed. I had so many things that I had to do and so many responsibilities, because part of it is I had to become the lab manager as well, but I think because I came over, I just couldn't do it anymore. So I had waited until this point where I couldn't do it anymore, but then when I finally said what I had to say, people responded.
So the point is, find your voice earlier.
Find your voice earlier. Find some support, reach out to people in the lab and let them know what your experience is, yeah.
Okay, Erin. So Erin actually has been in academia as well as working in laboratories in federal agencies, or private laboratories, sorry. So I wanted him to provide you with some insight as to how he went about deciding how to use his science degree.
Well, when I first graduated from Santa Cruz, I got a postdoctoral position at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. It was then which I really thought was a neat experience, and it was, the labs are kind of a mix between academia and industry, that's what they tell you. At the time, though, the budgets weren't so great, and they had pretty much told me that a permanent position wasn't really in the works for me, and I had an opportunity to go work for a company. When that opportunity came about, I actually, when I graduated, I didn't really want to be an academic. I didn't want to be a professor. And I wanted some industry experience. That was something that I really did want. I got that opportunity after about 6 months of my postdoc and went immediately to this company in San Diego. When I did that, I was told, and I love my advisor. My advisor has been phenomenal. My advisor is actually from El Paso originally. And he was just a phenomenal person, because what I really enjoy about him is that he will always tell me his opinions, and very honest and fairly diplomatic, not necessarily all the time, but he pretty much told me that, well, that's great, I think that's wonderful you're doing that, don't ever think about getting a faculty position again. And that didn't scare me. That was something that I thought. And one of the things that I've realized that when you tell me I can't do something, that's when, and I know I can do it, that's a great motivator for me. I went into industry for 4 years, and I realized that I stagnated a little bit. I was stagnating. I had learned a lot. It was great, but it shot me to a position at Los Alamos National Lab to do something similar, but to do the science end. I had become a glorified computer programmer. And at that time, it was a great opportunity for me. I got back into being able to publish some papers, being able to, the science community, go to the meetings. It got to the point at my company that it wouldn't support me to go to a professional meeting, and that was the kiss of death. It was like, I will be lost. And what challenged me at Los Alamos is that I was with a bunch of people that were pretty much older than I was, and they, none of them wanted to do any management. So whenever something came up, it would like everyone would be in a line and everyone would step back, and I'd be standing there going, oh, I guess I'll do it. But it afforded me some great opportunities to get some management experience there, and which has been incredibly valuable when I became a professor at UTEP. And so by the time I was applying for faculty positions, I had been 9 years out of my PhD, but I had published steadily over the years, just steadily, a paper a year, even when I was at the Los Alamos National Lab, and I had been at meetings, and I think that was a big difference for me as far as being able to even go into an academic position. And you know, an academic position is a totally different thing. You're your own boss. The flexibility is a lot more. But at each stage, I've learned tremendous amounts from each one and been able to draw on, and I think it's made me even a stronger faculty member.
So pros and cons of both?
There is a danger of not being able to get back if that's one of your goals. I think, I don't know if I had that as a goal, but what I realized is that if you choose that path, you're already considered non-traditional. So the challenge is that you have to sell yourself that you can be successful in this other environment. And so you have to be very strategic about how you approach things.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any questions from the audience? All right, we'll go over here on my right.
I would love to know your personal experiences, how you transitioned from an undergraduate program to your graduate programs. And so I'm curious about personal experience and advice you have for undergraduate seniors and how to decide programs, where to go, and how that process is.
And would you like to hear from anybody in particular, or should I address it to the whole panel?
Whole panel.
Okay, so we'll start with Yvonne.
Yes. Well, I think the most important thing is to really sit down with yourself and think about, what are my questions? What am I interested in? What do I want to know? Do I want to know, what is the fundamental particle? Do I want to know what's the acceleration of the expansion of the universe? What do I want to know? Because I think a lot of times we come to these conferences and there's all these recruiters and they'll say, hey, you want to come to this program? You want to come to this program? They've got all these, they've got money, they've got, and so you think, oh, they want me here, they want me there. And so it's sort of like we go where we think it's easy to go. And so we don't get to really research our own passion when we do that. So I think, number one, you have to figure out if you know, or if you have like a few things to choose from, look for people who are selling those things, okay? And then also you can once you do that, I think that's the most important thing, is to look into yourself and ask yourself, what are my questions? What kind of work do I want to do?
Erin?
It's a tough question. I think in some respects, I didn't have any undergraduate research experience when I applied for graduate school. I had no clue what it was. I had no clue about what's important for applying for graduate school. The fact that they're here, you're here right now, is a great resource, number one. The first thing you should consider is basically who you're going to work for. I think that's really, really important. These are going to be like your parents in some respects. It'll be challenging. They're like family. It's very challenging relationship sometimes, but if you're not going to work well with someone, it's not a place for you. Don't go by name. Don't go by reputation. That's really something that, I think I was sharing the experience earlier. I had a chance to go to an Ivy League school for graduate school. I went to UC Santa Cruz, and people thought I was nuts. And I wasn't nuts. I knew I wouldn't survive over there. And so you got to find out what you're comfortable with. So the other thing is information, and being here makes you really, really a leg up. If you have undergraduate research experience, that already tells you what you like and what you don't like, and that's really, really important.
Monica.
I always say I'm the wrong person to ask because I got through, I don't know how. But, you know, you all are very fortunate to be involved in SACNAS. I wasn't involved in SACNAS as an undergrad. So what I tell my students now is to explore, work in multiple labs, work with multiple people, and really you have to figure out what it is you love because you're going to have to read hundreds and hundreds of articles. And if you find yourself in an area that you don't like, even mildly, you're not going to make it really unless you have really good self-discipline, because once you're into graduate school, you're very much on your own, and you have to be motivated. You have to be a self-starter, and you have to be willing to read, you know, the 1 millionth article on whatever topic you're studying. So make sure you love it. That's what I have to say.
And so for what I would have to add to that is one of the things about graduate schools, it doesn't matter what field you're in, it doesn't matter where you go, whether you stay home, go far away, grad school is difficult, period, punto, final. There's just no ifs, ands, and buts about it. So there's two things that I advise my students as they're transitioning. Is one is find some kind of a support system, whatever that is, however you stay connected. Even if it's just coming to SACNAS once a year, find a support system that's going to get you through those hard, difficult times that you have to get up and do the si se puede kind of thing. And the other is I am a strong believer that there's no such thing as a bad decision or a wrong choice. It's like if you find yourself in a situation that's just not right for you, then that's a bad decision to stay in it. But anywhere is going to be good for you as long as you know that it's right for you, and you make the most of the opportunities that are provided to you at that particular position. Because like Aaron was saying, the difference between going to an Ivy League school and not an Ivy League school, you know, you're going to get pressures to do one thing or the other. You're the only one that really knows what's best for you, because you're the one that's going to have to live it for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years, depending. All right, I think we have a question over here on the left-hand corner.
Hello. I never think about to go to academia. I always want to go to industry, but I'm not sure if I should do the postdoc. I'm a third-year PhD student, and what I'm afraid of is that I don't do a postdoc, I don't get publications, and I go to industry, and then it doesn't work. At the end, I won't have publications to get a faculty position or something like that. So what do you think, at this point when I want to go to industry, is a good idea to do a postdoc first?
I'll fill that to Aaron.
It's completely dependent on your field. I think if you want that flexibility, as I was saying earlier, and you want that potential chance in industry, it depends on the company. Some companies encourage publications, some companies don't because it's proprietary information. You'd have to figure out what the field is and whether you can accomplish your postdoctoral whether the postdoc would afford you that sort of output that could make you sellable to academia. So again, you have to be very strategic. If you think you might want to go into faculty positions, absolutely do a postdoc.
Or to go into industry where they're going to allow you to publish.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And if you don't do that and you go into industry first, you're going to end up having to do the postdoc afterwards if you're going to want to transition back into academia. Let's see, any questions? Sorry, I got one over here, sorry.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Lee, and I'm at the Salt Lake Community College, headed to the University of Utah. And it's kind of a two-part question for Monica. I just left the Navajo Reservation, and the question is how did you deal with, I know, I kind of go through the feelings of I'm almost like betraying my people by leaving and getting to the university. How did you get past that, and how did you work in order to find that balance? And that's pretty much what I'm going through right now. Also, second part of that question is how is SACNAS going to reach to the younger Native American kids, or somebody like myself who spent a few years just kind of traveling that windy road and then getting to the point where like I need to get back into school? Is there any programs or is there anything implemented right now to reach these people who are deep in the reservation right now? Because a lot of this is great, and a lot of this, you know, and coming back to school, I'm among all these really smart people, and it's kind of overwhelming. So.
But you're smart too.
And the question, bottom line question is, what kind of things did you do in order to assimilate back into, I guess, into mainstream society, to academia? Is there any pointers that you could give maybe to help me along my path?
Well, first, I have to say it's always a struggle, but you have to believe in yourself and believe in what you're doing. And I believe in myself and what I'm doing because I'm working with children, and I had the opportunity to go to several reservations over the summer, and I worked directly with the children and had the chance to give them hugs and show them love and encourage them and tell them a little bit about my life. And so to me, that part is always very important, being able to go and work with the children on the reservations. And I know SACNAS, we're doing a lot to try and bring more American Indians into SACNAS and do more outreach work. I plan to write an NSF Career Award where you incorporate in your proposal how you're going to do outreach. And of course, I'm going to try and do outreach on reservations and through SACNAS somehow work together to do more outreach and bring more funding. But I think if you can find an area of study where you feel like what you're doing is not just for yourself, but it's for your community, then that will give you the strength to continue to deal with the fact that racism and prejudice still exist. And I have students who see my office, and I have lots of books. I look very smart, but they'll come into my office with my name on my door and they'll say, "Can you tell me where a professor is?" And I'm like, "It's Friday afternoon." Nope. I'm just the hired help, So, I mean, those kinds of things are discouraging because the fact of the matter is no matter how educated you are, no matter how much you work, people always see the color of your skin first and decide who you are. And we can't get past that, but you have to know in your heart who you are, and I don't think you ever assimilate, because if you assimilate, you forget who you are. And academia can be very seductive in pushing you to forget who you are, but that's, for me, where prayer comes in. Whenever I feel like I'm forgetting who I am, I pray a lot, and I go back to the reservation, and I talk to the children, and I remind myself of how much we need science to change our world for our children, because they deserve it. So I encourage you to keep going, and my office is always open to you if you need some help.
And just to add to that, so SACNAS actually has created a new initiative, it's Native American Initiatives, and hired a director, I guess 5-6 months ago. SACNAS will be launching its new website, I believe, in about a month or 6 weeks, something like that, guys. I can't remember exactly when. And so all of those different initiatives will be prominently highlighted on the website. And so there's an actual committee which you can become a member of if you'd like. In fact, I think they meet tomorrow, and I can get you that information if you need it, to actually make much more concerted efforts to reach out to the Native American communities. And one of the other initiatives that is already ongoing and has been for the last couple of years since we went to Utah is where they're outreaching to Native American populations at the high school level. And so they did this in Utah, and then they actually brought some of those students to last year's Dallas meeting, and then they connected to students, high school students there, and then also bringing them to this meeting. So that's just one example of some of the initiatives that SACNAS has taken to really make sure that we are reaching out to the Native American population. Okay, I think we have another question over here.
Hi, my name is Hazar Ramirez, and I have a question for Monica. I wanted to know if you could elaborate on your idea of coyote and what it means to be a coyote, and how that helped you, go enter into academia.
Well, the New York Times just had an article on coyotes and how no matter how hard they try to kill them, they just keep coming back stronger and stronger. That's what coyotes are. We're all coyotes, Because in American Indian mythology, where the coyote can be incredibly intelligent and incredibly stupid. And there's lots of times in academia where I feel incredibly stupid. So I identify with the coyote there. But I also know that coyote works in ways that people don't expect him to work, or has knowledge in areas that people don't expect. And I think for Chicano and American Indian communities, we have so much traditional knowledge that has been overlooked. And I think I'm a coyote in academia because I'm bringing that traditional knowledge back, and I'm using science to show that our knowledge is meaningful, it's not myth or folk psychology. And that's what a coyote does, you know, because we're sneaky. we turn it back on them.
All right, question over here.
Hello, thank you so very much for sharing all of your lovely stories for all of us. I really appreciate that. I was wondering, are there any resources available for people who don't share the same cultural experience as the community that they would like to help? Like, for example, I'm African American, but yet I see that there is a need for Native Americans to be more represented in the scientific community. So how can I help to make
Be involved
that-
in those kinds of activities.
Exactly.
Well, I'll start with 2 resources that you can start with. You're at one already. And there are chapters of SACNAS across the country. So we need to find one that's actually close to you that you can become involved with. And then there's probably other resources that we can find for you online as well. Those are the only ones I can think of off the top of my head. Did you guys have any others that you might want to offer? Thank you. Look for me later on during the conference, and we'll make sure we'll find a chapter for you to start interacting with. I'm assuming you're a student. I'm sorry. I may
Yes,
be
sir.
wrong. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Question over here.
It's loud. This question is directed to, of course, all 4 board members, but I wanted to preface that by saying I really identified with Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Teslika and some of those stories. I'm a Navy vet myself, and I also don't come from a very good childhood. And my question is, I'm an adult. I'm not 18 years old anymore. And so as I go through college and as I move through my education, I'm doing a lot of it by myself. Of course, I've got to come up with a lot of my own funding, and there's not a lot of places for me to fall back on. And when the world goes to hell in a handbasket, which it always seems to do, my question is how did you guys persevere? What were some strategies you used to keep your concentration up, to get things done when all you really wanted to do was maybe hide under the bed?
Sylvia. Sylvia. Sorry, Yvonne.
Did you say Sylvia?
I don't know
and
why
Sonia?
it's stuck in
Okay.
my head.
Yeah, I've had a lot of times like that, but I think what I had to learn to do was to ask for help, not hide under the bed. And there's so many people that want to help. There's so many units on all the campuses and people that are represented in the programs here. I mean, they want for you what they want for their own kids. You know, they want to help, and they've been through it. So there was Reentry Student Services. They help students who are coming back to school, people who have kids. There were the EOP office, lots of people that understood the issues and understood what kind of transition it took to go from, you know, coming from back home onto a university campus. So I think the main thing is to ask for help and just keep going.
And interestingly enough, I study inhibitory control because I think when you come from hard backgrounds, you really have to learn how to inhibit your attention. And when the world's going to hell, you have to put on those blinders and you just have to focus on the fact that you have an exam coming up, you have a paper that needs to be written, you have papers that better be published or you're going to lose your job. And the fact that so-and-so lost their job and you don't know how you're going to pay their rent and your rent, because I come from a family where we're expected to help each other, and I want to help, of course I do, you know, to the extent that I can, but I also have to stay focused. And I think part of my research is looking at how basic cognitive processes might promote resilience in children, and interestingly enough, if you're bilingual, you have better inhibitory control. So I want to tap into these natural resources that our children have and help them develop them so that they can be resilient in a world where there's always some kind of trauma going on. So I think also there's research that shows that meditation can really help you stay focused and block out everything else, because the important thing is for you to get your education so that you can help yourself and help others. And if you let all the chaos around you suck you in, you're not helping anybody. So just stay focused.
Anything to add, Aaron?
Oh, for me, when the world was kind of crumbling, it's always, doing research, I just loved it. And so I just dove into research. Maybe it's not very healthy, maybe, but for me, it's all about focus. And I was very productive at certain times of my life, and I think it's because I spent all my time in the lab doing things. But in general, I mean, staying focused, I mean, that is the number one thing. Things maybe crumble around you, but keep your eye on the ball. I mean, what's the end game here? My goal was to get out in Santa Cruz in 4 years because I didn't really enjoy Santa Cruz very well at the time, but I did it in 5, and that was considered fairly fast. But it was because I was able to I loved what I was doing.
And I think some of the tools that you use kind of depend on what kind of person you are. And I'm very extroverted and process the world around me. I needed people. So whenever my world was falling apart, I needed somebody and it needed to be somebody that was similar to me. Because when I went to the University of Virginia, I was the only person of color in the entire graduate school. And so the one person I used to go talk to, of all people, was this Mexican guy that worked at Sbarro's at the mall. And so I would just go to the mall in the food court, and then he introduced me to his wife who worked at Walmart. And so I would just somebody to just go talk to and speak a little Spanish to. Sometimes was just all I needed to feel like, okay, I need to get back, just touch base with home. And then I met a lot of friends here at SACNAS, and we were all going to the same kinds of things, and so we would just call each other. And what I was really missing was that sense of culture, sense of home. And so again, you kind of find those tools that work for you. For me, staying focused, yeah, that wouldn't have worked. I needed to go talk to somebody. So you've got to find that one thing that's going to help you kind of reinvigorate yourself. But I think the big thing is what Yvonne said, find help. You've got to find the help. And sometimes you need to ask people what that help is if you don't know what it is yourself.
Can I add one more thing, too?
Yeah.
I actually took a science education class because I was having a lot of trouble focusing. I was having a lot of trouble with test anxiety. And I started to understand what were the things that were distracting me. And there was one thing in particular that I thought was really interesting. That was the idea of the stereotype threat. Have you guys heard of that? Mm-hmm. So if you belong to a group to which negative stereotypes are attributed, you have this distraction where you're always worried that you're going to somehow validate that stereotype. And it affects not only your test performance, but it comes into play at every interaction that you have in the department. If you've got to talk to a professor, oh, does he think he's stupid, or he's going to know I'm stupid, and he's going to think all Chicanos are stupid. And so there are specific things that I think are unique. I mean, and it happens, to everyone. I mean, even like they give math tests to 2 different groups, white males and Asian males, and the same math test. And they said to the white males, hey, Asians do really good on this test. And when they said that, their scores dropped. And then if you're a woman of color, then you have a double identity threat because you think women can't do math, I'm a Chicana. So there have actually been studies done as quantitatively showing that your scores can go down, and if you have double identity threat, they go down even further. So it's really, I think it's a good idea. It helped me a lot to take a science education class and to really understand the phenomenon what's happening with you. And I remember when I found that out, it really helped me. I was able to focus a little bit more. I mean, there's always lots of stress, but there are studies, there's research you can do to figure out. We have so much that comes at us. We're constantly told, minorities didn't go to good high schools and they get low scores and they need this program and that program. And then when you want help from people, sometimes you have to write, a 5-page paper about all the obstacles that you have to overcome. You start to feel like, can I do this? And so be aware of, it's called identity politics. Be aware of how that's affecting you. Sometimes you can sort out what are the things that are bothering me, and sometimes that helps.
Question over here.
Mike Leibowitz from Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. I just wanted to make a brief comment, is that this stereotype incorporation into your own psyche is a real problem, and it's something that I believe that the great success that we're seeing around us from you and your colleagues here at this meeting is what's going to overcome this. And just a quick story, we have a gentleman in our medical school who is the chairman of our rehabilitation medicine department. He has rather severe cerebral palsy, and he mostly travels in a wheelchair and has a rather severe speech impediment. And he travels around the country and gives medical grand rounds on cerebral palsy. And in typical grand rounds, first the patient comes out and the medical students and faculty will ask the patient questions and examine them. And then afterwards, the visiting professor will come and give a talk. So he goes around, but he doesn't bring a patient with him because he's the patient. And he comes out in his hospital gown, in his wheelchair, speaking not very well because he has the speech impediment. And they examine him and try to decide what kind of a career he can go into with his rehabilitation defect. And usually they come up that, well, maybe he can, sell pencils in the hospital lobby or something like that if they really train him a lot. And then he goes backstage and changes into his jacket and tie and comes out and gives medical grand rounds on cerebral palsy. And he makes a great impact.
It's quite the coyote.
You can't judge people by the first impression. And I think the same is true for handicapped, for ethnicity, for whatever thing. But people look at someone and they jump to a conclusion. You can't incorporate that into yourself.
Yeah. Thank you. Next.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria de Jesus Martinez. I'm currently an undergraduate student at Sacramento City College, majoring in physics with research interest in astrophysics. My question is, for people who have, I don't know if this is the correct term, but say an obscure major, what advice can you give us? Because every time I tell someone what my major is, I just get this blank stare. And sometimes I feel all alone, and I'm not sure. What do you recommend?
We'll start with you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're, they gave me this. They said my mic isn't working. Your major is astrophysics?
Correct.
And you're saying that people give you a stare because they think it's obscure?
I guess because they don't understand it, and I just don't feel that I have that much support. I mean, I do have support from the faculty, but there's not that many people that are majoring in that, so.
Right, yeah, I understand. I mean, I've been to many SACNAS conferences, and way back in the beginning when we used to have the conversations with the scientists, there was a physics table, and there were like 3 people sitting at it. And it is kind of, especially when I go back home and I start to tell people about what I do, and they get this like glazed look. And then I always try to not talk about it. I don't want them to think I think I'm so smart, or I don't want to. I want to fit in. I don't want to. And so I think when people give the blank stare, I always felt like I need to learn how to express physics better. I mean, that's part of the problem too. Is our communities are not exposed to this kind of stuff, and we always talk in this academic speak, and there's lots of ways that we need to, in a lot of ways, we need to learn how to communicate that. So part of it is, and it's good practice, because for me, I really want people back home to have the privilege of being wowed by physics. I hate that I'm the only one, and that people back home, can't understand it. Like we are a commodity when we're back home. So in terms of getting support, it's just like, again, well, you're here. SACNAS conference. I think all of our emails are in the
program.
In the program, thank you, Sylvia. And
I'm not going to live this down.
Definitely get in contact with us. And you guys all have cards, right? Business cards. Pass them out. Find each other. There's going to be the conversations with scientists, but I understand, and one thing about it is like when people find out you're a physics major, wow, you're a physics major, and then they want you, they start playing you up, and you saw that image I put up there. I was like on the cover at UCSC, so talk about being under a microscope. It's a lot of pressure, because when everybody knows what you're doing, everybody knows if you fail, so it's a lot of pressure. So I understand, but definitely you got to reach out and find other people and be proud of who you are. And when you go back home and people think you're strange, bring them in. Try to explain it to them. Explain it to them until they get it, and then they're wowed, and then they're right there with you.
Thank you.
Aaron?
Let me add to that, because I started coming to SACNAS in 1989. I think I was the only geoscientist here. I was the only, for a while there, the only U.S.-born Hispanic seismologist in the country. And so there's an incredible amount of isolation, but one of the things coming here, again, I didn't have to be in the same field to feel comfortable here. And it's a very welcoming environment. And so the thing that even going home, in some respects, you have to come up with an elevator speech, okay? Like you're in an elevator with someone asks you what you do. You study the stars, I study the origin of the universe. You know, my thing is earthquakes. Say that, people understand it. I'm from LA, you know. Hopefully we don't have an earthquake while we're here. But the point is really think about that and internalize that, you know, something very simple. And I think, and I always tell my students, if you can't explain it to your grandmother, then there's an issue. Okay, so being able to explain it to someone that doesn't fully understand the field is really, really important.
Thank you for your question. All right, yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Omari Jones Nelson. I just recently graduated from Purdue University with a master's in biology. And my question to you, all of you guys, is I see most of you, all of you have your PhD. And usually forums like this, a lot of the speakers have a PhD in some science or higher education. My question is, what are the flaws and benefits to either maintaining a master's or going for a PhD? A lot of the time, a lot of people say, you know, you have a master's, why don't you go for a PhD? But I don't want to be caught in a certain area where, I mean, I have a PhD, but I don't really feel like I have a better benefit and to go to the jobs I want to, you know, pursue.
Before we move on, do you have a particular career aspiration? Is there something you really want to do?
My concentration from a master's was parasitology.
Okay.
So I'm looking towards government or nonprofit organizations.
Okay.
And so it probably wouldn't be academia, so that's, I guess, where the question lies.
Okay. We'll start with Aaron.
Yeah, I tell students that having a master's is an incredible degree to have if you want to go into industry, especially in my field. And what that does is that when you have a master's degree, you're given a project and you're basically told to solve it. That's a great degree to have if you work for a company and they say, here's this project, solve it. And then you have to not only solve it, you have to write about it and articulate it orally, generally. That's what a master's degree is, at least in my field. If you want to actually be the person deciding what the problem is you need to solve, that's a PhD. So in many respects, to be a practicing scientist, and if that's what you want to do, you have to have that PhD. Now, you can do it with industry experience and whatnot and lead various projects, but in general, to come up with the ideas that need to be solved, to try to address certain problems, that's generated by being a PhD. So it depends what your goals are.
Thank you.
That make sense? Thanks. And we'll go over this direction.
Hello, my name is Beverly Gonzalez. I'm a third-year PhD student in the Department of Biostatistics at Brown University, and also a single mother to a 4-year-old daughter. I guess my question is addressed to Dr. Rodriguez. I came to this conference to meet somebody.
It's okay, take your time.
Don't feel bad. I thought that would be me.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So my guess is that you're trying to find out how do you balance being able to be a good mother and not feel guilty about it and still be able to commit the time that you need to your graduate studies.
And I came to this conference to meet somebody like Dr. Rodriguez. Maybe you can start talking and I'll continue my sentence when I get to
You're making me cry. I look back and I wish I hadn't worried so much about what was happening with my kids. I spent a lot of time and energy thinking, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be spending more time with my kids. And it's funny because, I would have had to work anyway. At least you have some flexibility in academia. But like I showed that picture of my kids, and they've all graduated from college. My oldest son is in medical school. And I'm so glad I did it. And they had such a good experience. So if you can be, like at UCSC, we have family student housing where there's so much support for parents. We have, there are after-school programs. There are kids that actually get to do projects with graduate students. There's lots of, the kids need to see their parents being happy and living a full life. That's how they grow up to learn to make sure that, to make sure that they're happy, that they live a full life. So I feel like I wish I hadn't spent so much time worrying about that, because I really did. I cried like you. I felt guilty all the time. You know, I need to be home. I need to be with my kids. And, you know, you go home, they don't want to be with you. I remember when the first time I came to SACNAS, I won the poster prize, you know, the research poster presentation, and there was a $500 award. Thank you, Sylvia. And and I ran to the phone and I called my kids and I said, I won $500. We're gonna get the brakes fixed on the car. And I could hear them all in the background, yay! The whole thing was great. I want to hear what you want to say. I'm just
Sorry,
talking to give
now
you
I
time.
can talk.
Film it.
So I came to this conference to meet somebody exactly like you, because you know exactly like what I'm going through, and I guess how do you manage everything, and most importantly, how do you manage saying when the workload gets too much for you? You know, you have to prove, you have to work twice as hard to prove wrong, like the stereotypes associated with not only being a minority student, first generation student, but also as a woman, you know?
Yeah. Definitely, I know. And I actually, you know, like I said, I was a reentry student in the physics department with a lot of very, very young, very, very sharp physics nerds. And we do have one female faculty member, but she's, I would say she's kind of marginalized as well. So constant pressure. And it did affect it. I had test anxiety, you know, one of those things where you're taking a test and you can't figure it out, and as soon as you hand off the test to the professor, you know exactly what to do. Like, that's how I know I am smart. This is about test anxiety, people. So how did I do it? I don't really have an answer to how do you balance all of it. You just do it until you can't do anymore. And you have to, like Erin was saying, know what your goals are, know what the end game is. And I also had an attitude, the si se puede, you know, like, I have a right to this. And yeah, I have kids, and yeah, you know, you don't have to have kids. You know, your parents are scientists and they help you. There's a girl in our lab whose mother helps her write her papers. You know, so I had this sort of an attitude, like when I first, it's like, what? There aren't any Chicana physicists? Well, guess what? I'm going to be a Chicana physicist, because damn it, somebody's going to do it. You know, but like I said, I'm sorry that I don't have answers. All I know is that you have to reach out for support. You have to talk to other mothers, because you're not the only one that's going through that. And it's okay, like, the kids are going to be okay. What else are you going to do? Go work 2 jobs to support your kids? You know, why not show them, you know, what a life where you're living your passion, so they can also have permission to do that. But, you know, let's talk.
And I think,
Yeah.
I wasn't able to have my own children because I grew up drinking water contaminated with TMC, what is it called? I don't know, but it's some chemical that causes tumors to grow. And so I wasn't able to have my own children, but I always had my nephew with me, the one who was in the pictures. And I brought him out every summer to be with me in Kansas. And you'll actually look back on these years when you were so stressed, and you'll have funny stories from them. One of my funniest stories is when I was working on my dissertation, my little nephew, he was, I don't know how old he was, I think 10 or 11. And he came in at like 2 a.m. one night and he said, you know, I don't think I want to be like you anymore, because you're in here all night. I hear you tapping away. And, you know, so I think instead of getting a PhD, I'm just going to get a PH. So you'll get through it.
And I was just going to add to it, we actually, at UTEP, they actually have this female faculty mentoring program, and so it was one of the first brown bag lunches that they sent us to, and one of our associate provosts or whatever was talking a similar situation, how she felt so guilty about all the time she spent in the lab when she was getting her PhD and when she was first a young faculty. So she said that she finally got tenure, and she actually took her kids out to dinner and apologized to them, and they were like, for what? And she was like, for never being there. They're like, you were there too much. So I think a lot of it is just self-imposed expectations. As long as you love your kids, And then exactly what you were saying. Yes, go ahead.
Because my kids, we lived at family student housing, and we didn't have a washing machine in the house, so my kids all had rolls of quarters, and they went and they did their own laundry. My daughter was doing her laundry since the first grade, and I remember being at UC Santa Cruz is a really nice neighborhood. They went to this school. A lot of the moms were stay-at-home moms, their husbands made lots of money, and they were feeling guilty because they did the laundry for their kids. So they're feeling guilty because they're doing laundry for the kids. I'm feeling guilty because my kids had to do their own laundry. I mean,
yeah.
The kids are fine.
Did you have another question?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Brittany Kamai from the FIST Vanderbilt Bridge Program, and my question is directed at what type of tips can you give to upcoming professionals on how to present their work confidently and be confident in doing science and that you're actually like good at it and stuff like that. So that's my question.
You can start with that one.
Practice, practice, practice. I'm serious, and actually what I have students do a lot is actually read their talks aloud or read papers aloud, do everything aloud so that you can actually work through it. And memorize things, but make it, if you don't practice, it won't happen. And so that's the first stage, and it's really like to get that sort of confidence that you can do that. And then later on, you don't need, as you get more and more practice, you don't need those cues. You don't need to memorize things. You can just write bullets or something like that. But it's practice, it really is.
Monica, anything to add to that?
It's just believing in yourself and in the work you're doing, I think. That takes time. And, if you're not all that confident the first couple of times, that's okay, especially here at SACNAS, because we've all been there and we know what it's like to be nervous. And, I thought I was going to come up here and cry and not be able to get through my talk. So we always have those self-doubts. So you just, know that here at SACNAS, you're in a supportive community and it's okay. And this is the place to practice and try out your ideas and get feedback, and over time, you start to feel like you are that PhD, and you have confidence.
Yeah, I guess it's the same with me. It's just a matter of confidence. I feel like I'm still working on it, and I know people tell you, oh, well, you're the only one who really knows your project. Other people don't really know, so don't worry about it. But that doesn't. You don't until you just have to keep going, and then you'll get there. That's really, there's no secret.
So one of the things is you have to look the part, right? So you got to dress confidently and professionally, and the other is enthusiasm. I mean, if you really enjoy what you're doing, it'll come across naturally, and the confidence will just stem from that.
And if someone else knows more than you, you can ask them questions.
Yeah, turn it
that's
on them.
That's what poster presentations are for, too, so you can get some feedback.
Yeah. Okay.
So my name is Alejandro Gonzalez, and it's probably going to get a little bit complicated. So I go to a public charter math and science academy that places me as a senior in high school as well as a sophomore in undergraduate studies at the University of North Texas. And so out of 200 kids, I'm the only Latino American in my class, and I feel like there's a lot of stigmas or people watching me to fail out because there's a lot of GPA restrictions, like lower than 3.5, you get dismissed from the academy. And we started out with 4 Latinos, and I'm the only one left in my senior class, and I feel like people are waiting for me to fail out.
But don't do it.
What do you feel?
I'm gonna work hard, but I feel like there's so many stigmas, or people are watching me, and people are like associating all the stereotypes of a Latino American on me in the academy because I'm on the minority. There's only 0.5% of the students there are minorities, and that makes me and one other person.
You? Did you want to?
How do you deal with the stigmas? How do you deal with the stereotypes and the slander and the people talking about you behind your back because you're Latino American in a place where they feel that you don't belong?
I would ask them. I've had discussions with people where I would just go in and say, so what do you think about all these diversity programs? What's your thoughts about, students who are supported and by all these programs and all this money goes into it? Do you think it's necessary? And, 8 times out of 10, they say yeah. And it's amazing that a lot, I mean, I'm not saying that, racism doesn't exist, but I think half of the struggle is what are the thoughts in your mind, and are they really matching what's happening? So you can alleviate half of the stress right there. Like I said, I gave you this example about, I thought people were seeing me as a maid because I had to get rid of the hazardous waste disposal, and they really weren't. They were just too lazy to put the trash in the proper place. So when I brought it up, they're like, oh, we didn't know you felt like that. But, that's only half the battle. Of course, there are always going to be people who are just racist, who will underestimate you every time and write you off, and you just have to believe in yourself, know what you want, and know that you have a right. I mean, nobody has a right to interfere with you achieving your dreams.
Let me just quick soundbite. Turn a negative into positive. Don't be that statistic.
Thank you.
Work hard.
Everybody, I'm sorry, but we're actually over time. So first, before we actually thank our panel, we do need to clear this room because it needs to be, before we thank our panel. We need to clear this room because this is where we're going to be meeting for our joint welcoming session with Maes. So when we're done and we thank our panel, I need you all, everybody to clear out, but I want you all back at 4 o'clock, okay? So again, I want to give a big round of applause, please, for our panel taking their time.